Hello everyone. This video is the continuation of my microservices series. I'm focusing this on scalability, and this is probably going to be the first video on scalability I have. And I'm going to focus specifically on the scale cube. The scale cube is basically a quick way and a high level view to get leaders, management teams to understand why microservices is important and what you can do with them. The focus of the scale cube is basically the X, Y, and Z, obviously a cube, axes. So essentially, if you're scaling through the x-axis, that's a duplication process, spinning up instances or replicas of the same server or services, scale by cloning. The y-axis is kind of functional decomposition, or scale by splitting different things. Uh, And what that is more specifically is you got these big, large monolithic applications, and you want to divide them up into smaller pieces, more manageable pieces. Very simple concept. Maybe not necessarily that simple to implement, but the cool thing is, Mr. Richardson's book on microservice patterns, he goes into a really detailed example of how to do all three of these X, Y, and Z processes. I think in chapter 2 he starts referring to functional decomposition, going through the process of decomposing the application into smaller pieces, and then the, the process of turning a monolithic application architecture to microservices architecture is pretty well done. Now, granted, that's just one method of it. And then now the z-axis, which is data partitioning. So, so now you have your instances and you have your smaller pieces of a larger application functioning. And then, there might be the data. The data might be getting large subsets, and you might need to go into subsets or different types of sharding mechanisms to partition the data. And pretty much that's essentially the scale cube in a nutshell. Don't want to kill the cat, but more focusing on scalability. So this book on Art to Scalability, right here, here's the book. Now the subtext title is Scalable Web Architectures, Processes, and Organizations for the Modern Enterprise. So digital modernizations, and kind of going into more of the concepts here. So now the book is from the AKF partners, which I'm assuming is the abbreviations of the owners. And here's a whole series of books and other books that they recommend for microservices architecture. And right here, they're talking about the scale cube a little bit more in detail. Not really much. It just basically goes into some pros and cons. And it's at the akfpartners.com. You can search that. And there's more additional diagrams there. But basically, if you just do scale cube or microservices scale cube in Google, you should be able to find this site and others. But going back to the book, this book is divided into 4 parts. It's like 32, 33 chapters. How many chapters is it? Let me make sure I understand. There's like 33 chapters in all in this book. 4 parts. The parts, are, this is basically high-level architectural concept book and how you go about doing it and implementing it within your organization. The first part is basically about staffing your scalable organization. Now, this is basically kind of like going into levels of responsibilities. Chapter 3, designing the organization. I mean, if you're going to do a digital modernization, there's going to be some restructure and reorganization of your organization. There's no ways about it. You're going to have to redo the labor, redistribute how you do, how your people are working. So there's, management strategies, I guess, leadership strategies on getting this done, and the key responsibilities. So in chapter 2, I wanted to show you that the roles of the scalable technology organization. So each, each area here, you got your architectural responsibilities, engineering, DevOps, infrastructure, etc. responsibilities. But the CTO, CIO, CFO, CEO, other business owners, general managers, etc., have their own sets of responsibilities, or at least somebody needs to be taking care of these activities, and these things should be addressed while you're doing your transition into a microservices architecture. Uh, Part 2, building processes for scale. So you're in the process of architecting. So now you've got the management leads and you're actually doing the work principally. So now assuming you have an architecture team, you just don't, but assuming there's an architecture team involved, usually, there's a whole set of process chapters on that. So what I'm wanted to show specifically chapters on establishing architectural principles. So guidelines of kind of giving okay, this is our game floor. This is what we're going to work with. You're going to have obviously an architectural review board especially when you're dealing with multiple groups or intergroups within a corporation and company. Joint architectural design, and same kind of construct. So you got basically a whole architectural review board, agile architectural design, and kind of you're focusing on competencies and capabilities within your microservices, which is kind of what the whole point of microservices is kind of about. Your scalability, and on part 3, you're going more in the details of the actual design of the microservices that are, you're using the scale cube at the application level, the database level, the infrastructure level, and cloud level 2 could be also applied in here. And that's 3 and 4 basically are solving these types of issues. Soaring into the cloud, your grid computing, working with big data, and planning the actual data centers and how they're going to be working and managing, which is kind of part of the part 1. Also, you would have to be kind of focusing on. So again, going back to the purpose of video, the scale cube. Scalability is essentially the scale cube, the X functional X, pardon me. X is horizontal duplication, Y is functional decomposition, and the Z is data partitioning. Each one of these should have another video on, more specifically go more in detail, but right now at the high level, that's all one needs to start focusing to get a good start.